Let's talk about Legendborn. Hi guys, my name's Abby and I'm restarting my YouTube so I can be more involved in booktube and all things books because I love reading and I'm rediscovering my love for reading post grad. The series that we're going to talk about today is The Legendborn Cycle by Tracy Dion, and it's a King Arthur retelling through a Southern Black girl perspective. Legendborn is told through the story of Bree, who's a 16-year-old black girl living in North Carolina, and she gets accepted into the early college program, which lets gifted high school students go and attend campus like they're college students and basically experience what it's like before enrolling full time. Bree enters the college program 3 months after her mother's accident. And she is racked with grief by this event because the last time that she talked with her mother was a very bad argument, and the next day she got into a car accident. So Bree is, throughout the first book at least, is dealing with grief and trying to reconcile with the guilt of leaving her mother behind in what she views as a bad way. And when she goes to North Carolina, she finds out that perhaps her mother's death was not an accident after all, after she witnesses a magical attack and she sees a boy and a girl fight these basically imaginary monsters and use magical powers called ether to defeat them. So after she finds them, she figures out that there's this secret society at North Carolina called the Order of the Round Table, and it's basically a modernized version of King Arthur's Round Table. And this organization was made to combat the dark beings from the netherworld or the underworld, and basically they're tasked with fighting these monsters. So Bree decides to infiltrate this society to find out what really happened to her mother. No spoilers for the first two books. Basically, Legendborn is about Bree coming into herself and coming into finding her own power, and then in the second book, she's on the run from the table because she finds out that they only really want her for her power. They also basically want to control her and monopolize her power for the table's own use. So, throughout this book, what I really love is the representation and the advocacy that Brie has as a strong female character, but she also is just a teenage girl, honestly. She is someone who lost her mother at a very young age and she has no idea why. And there's also a magic in her which she never got to really explore with her mother around. So this whole thing really is about confronting intergenerational trauma and magic and um, the roots that are in the Black communities in the South, and really coming into contention of what that means for Bree and finding herself, but also like paying homage to her ancestors who got her to where she is today. So I'll first start with Legendborn. What I really like is one, Selwyn Kane. Okay, I'm kidding with that. He's like 18 and I'm like a little bit older than him, so hands off. Anyways, so I really just love the black girl love in this book. There's so many tender moments between Bree finding other black women and finding camaraderie with them. But also, I love her best friend Alice Chen, who's an Asian American, and she's also young and very feisty, and she knows her own worth and also advocates for Bree as well. But I just also really like the exploration of hierarchies, the social and economical, and even, of course, the racism that stems in the South even nowadays, and kind of trying to combat flawed systems too. But I also love the celebration of Southern folk traditions. I'm not someone who comes from that background, but I really enjoy reading from an author who obviously is very steeped in that community and knows a lot about it. And then there's also a lot of differentiation between the table and the black communities, or like the ether users that are not from the table. So the table is very gatekeepy in the way it's like, oh, ether is like stolen magic used for your own gain, and then like you die basically when you're very young because you're using this power. But within the root communities, which is basically used within Black communities in the South who are magic users. They call it root, and there's like different ways of how these magical communities view their gifts and their privilege of using it, and also the attitude towards either honoring your ancestors or disregarding them from using like bloodcraft, which is basically what Bree's magic is. It's bloodcraft, and that's very frowned upon in her own community because there's a lot of root users who say that magic should be borrowed and not stolen. And I think that's just really cool seeing the cultural differentiations there. And then within the first book, at least in Legendborn, there's very much a Hunger Games esque attitude towards it. Like the intro to this world that's like racked with a lot of mistakes and a lot of systems that are corrupt. And basically, just one girl, she's just a teenage girl, but she's trying to dismantle this whole centuries old system in her own way. But also, that's a lot of pressure to put on a teenage girl, you know? I also really like the exploration in the first book of navigating grief and trauma, especially at a young age. Bree lost her mother way too young, and I definitely found myself sniffling, or at least my eyes starting to hurt because tears were forming because she was thinking about her mom and how much guilt that she had for not treating her well in life and then having to pay homage to her in death when she couldn't do it in life. There's a lot of guilt and a lot of trauma that's being explored in the first book, which I really like. But I also like how Bree is also, I keep saying this, but she's just a girl and she loves boys. And the love triangle in this series is not really overpowering of literally the life or death situations, which I really like because sometimes with like YA fantasy stuff, like the love triangle can overcome the real stakes in the book. Like literally, we're about to die, and why are we talking about like love and stuff during the intense moments? And I think there's just a delicate balance that should be like struck. I think when the authors are trying to make those choices. I don't know anything about it. Take my words with a grain of salt, please. But yeah, I just like the balance in the first book at least. Some things that I think didn't really catch my eye where it's just like I felt like some parts felt slow or didn't really grab my attention, but once I got to the last 200 pages of the book, girl, I spent until 3 a.m. finishing Legendboard, and I was really shook by the end, and I could not go to bed for a while because I was like, oh my god, what's going to happen? So then I had to read the second book, obviously. Let's just not talk about how these kids are fighting for their lives. They're literally like 16, 17, some of them even younger, and I'm like, girl, go to class, please get your degree or like work towards your degree, you know. But yeah, you can't get rid of all those nuances and stuff in this kind of book. Bree's a girl, she's a teenager. Let's just get over it because she is going to be annoying sometimes. Some of her narration, it very much feels like a teenager, but I think that's, authentic. And I think we're allowed to get annoyed at main character if they make choices that we don't necessarily agree with. But such is life. For the dialogue, I thought for the most part was okay. Maybe there's some a little cliche like, and now I know what my destiny is. Something like that. I don't know. I can't remember an exact line, but some things I didn't rock with, but that's also okay. I would give this like a 4 out of 5. So, in Bloodmarked, I think with any series, especially popular series, there is the second book syndrome, where is the middle of the series, and perhaps it's not that great of a sequel following the debut. But I thought this was okay. There were definitely more parts that I didn't stick with, but we'll get to that in a bit. What I really liked was the exploration and expansion of magic. Basically, Bree and her closest friends in the table go on the run because the table's hunting them. They come across a community of magic users who are not a part of the table and not even a part of an actual organization. A lot of humans are trying to use magic for their own gain, obviously, and there's like stuff with demons and stuff who are basically like bargaining for these magic users or for humans to become magic users. So I think the main thing that stuck with me was the difference between borrowing, stealing, and bargaining for magic. There's a lot of like contractual language in this, but I think with the introduction of new characters, it really broadens the scope of the world, and we're discovering everything at the same time Bree is. So I think that's cool. and then Bree and Stell's relationship deepening. Also, with the second follow up to the debut novel, there's always the second lead, the second relationship that comes into the forefront. And, I just think if no one calls me Cariad, then I don't want them. And I think, oh my god, they do finally kiss, guys. They do finally kiss. Sorry, I thought this was all gonna be spoilers free, but anyways, we're just gonna keep going. But that literally let go of all the breath that I was holding and all the tension because it was so good. I think the intergenerational trauma continues to be explored as well in this series. And I don't know, the book doesn't shy away from it. Instead, it really confronts it in an awesome way. And that's how vague I can say without spoiling it. I will go into some spoilers later. There's more southern communities being showed. Magic, demons. I think my favorite part was the volition section because that was really like a place where ancestors of Black people um, who used to be slaves, they basically retook the land that they were oppressed on. And I really like that. And I like how the ancestors were creating a safe space essentially for magic users to explore themselves and really hone in on their skills. So I thought that was really cool too. And that sense of reclaiming the land is very important, I think, in this whole series. And it just adds so much to the conversation, which I really like. I'll get into the iffy part while also going into more spoilers. So basically, what I really like is that Bree essentially burns her ancestral paths. She has this ability as a medium, as a blood crafter, and even as a scion of King Arthur, that she is able to access ancestors' memories and even walk through them. And I think that's so cool. And I love how she's so powerful, even though she's still trying to figure out who she is and what her powers are. But essentially, towards the end of the book, she burns her ancestral paths to forge her own. And I really like that because in the author's note in Bloodmarked, Tracy talks about how there's this conflict, I think, within a lot of people who, or just a lot of cultures who look back on their ancestors or who have this doctrine to respect your elders and give back to them and acknowledge them for the hardships that you went through, especially for immigrants. Kind of warring with yourself on to honor what your ancestors have done with for you, but also realizing that there may have been too much burden and responsibility put on their descendants to uplift and uphold that honor. I think that's very much apparent in this series because essentially with the Legendborn, they are passed on their skills and their magic when they're awakened from their knights because they're descendants of the Knights of the Round Table. But they also have to sacrifice basically their own lives if their squire dies. They feel like a part of them has died, and they only really live until 35, so they're super young when they die. So they're giving up basically a lot just to fight this holy war that their knights and their ancestors have put onto them. So it's kind of the same with Bree, who's in between. She's in between the colonizers and the imperialist mindset of King Arthur and his round table and the Europeans, but also her own black ancestors and her own foremother, Vera, who basically became a blood crafter and sacrificed her own bloodline to make sure that everyone was safe. Because her curse and her family's curse was all the mothers have to not live. And they basically die very young because they're given up as a sacrifice for a bargain that Vera struck with the demon. And basically, Bree and all of her foremothers were put under that pressure and kind of that sacrifice and burden that they didn't even ask for. So I think Bree is figuring out how to respect your elders, but also put her foot down and put a boundary in between what she wants in her own life and what her ancestors have given to her. So I think like Bree coming into her own power and saying, I will find my own without you guys, you have done enough, is just really awesome. And she basically unlocks her own power because she lets go of those, I guess, setbacks and those fears that her foremothers had. And you know what? I think that slays too. With more things that I didn't really like with Bloodmarked was This was definitely longer than the first book, and I think there were some scenes that I didn't really care for. I know Bree's imprisonment, that actually didn't last that long, but I still was kind of bored. But also, I felt like at the same time, maybe I'm a hypocrite for saying this, but I feel like it was moving so fast until we got to Volition and until we got into Georgia, where they went to that demon bar and, they were kind of like exploring new worlds, basically. But I just feel like there were some parts that I didn't jive with, but you know what? That's to say for any book. I think also Brie was so angry. She was so angry at Cell, and I was like, I feel like that's a little bit uncalled for. But I do get where she's coming from because when she was in prison, she was basically mesmered and like drugged up, so she can't really trust her own memories for a while. So I think she's dealing with the trauma of that. And then Cell basically mesmered her because he didn't want her to see that he was basically succumbing to his blood and becoming more demon than human. But then it's like I get why Cell did that because he was protecting her, but then he Bree was mad because he didn't trust her. I don't know. Anyways, very much low key teenage drama, but also just young love drama, whatever. Okay, I get why Arthur's chapters where he basically possessed Bree and took over her body, and then she was sent to his memories that was his prison when he's like not awakened and stuff. I really was very uncomfortable reading those chapters. But I think that was the point because it's basically like a white man is taking over a black young girl's body, and I'm like, oh, I hate that so much. But yeah, I think that was the point. But I thought Bree's journey into his dreamscape prison was cool. It was really sweet that Nick and Sal came together to Bloodwalk and find her, like Bree has done to Bloodwalk and find Nick. And I also think that's so cute. Like basically, they're like meant for each other because Lancelot is Nick's ancestor, and Lancelot and King Arthur have a special bond because Lancelot is his second knight, and then they're best friends and they trust each other, and now they manifest into this very cute relationship and love that Bree and Nick shares for each other, and oh, I love it. I also love Cell, and I'm like, what? I don't even know. But at this point, I'm just like, Bree, I don't know who you're gonna choose, but I would really love if you chose yourself because that would be very great. But how is she gonna find two boys willing to do that for her when I can't even find one in real life? Who knows? Anyways, let me know if you're Team Nick or Team Cell because I will be Team Bree always. Basically, whatever she chooses, I will probably back her up, but at the same time, maybe not. I don't know. I would give this 4 out of 5 too. I actually gave Legendborn 4.75 out of 5 and then Bloodmarked 4 out of 5 just because I didn't like it as much, but you know what? It wasn't that bad of a sequel in my opinion. I really like how Tracy Dion is a fangirl at heart, and that really gives me hope for more fangirls to become very popular authors and up and coming authors too. That cliffhanger at the end of Bloodmark though, oh my god, I don't know where the series is gonna go. I think that's what really has me intrigued and will really have me buying this book right away when it comes out. I will be Team Bree, but this relationship, this love triangle, gives polyamorous, but at the same time, I don't know what's gonna happen. I do see a future where Bree is with Nick and then Sal is kind of a bodyguard, and he's like okay with Bree being with Nick, but also Sal wants Bree for himself. I don't know. Maybe Bree can just trade weekends with them or something. In the end, for all your qualms, if anybody has qualms, remember that Bree is a teenager and she is allowed to be a teenager. So, yeah, I hate on teenagers as a joke because I'm an old person now, apparently. But I'm actually serious when I say let kids be kids, let them make mistakes, let them love stupidly, make stupid decisions, and they can live. But maybe Bree should just stop getting almost unalived all the time because that's basically all of the second book. Please go read this series. This series is so good and you will not regret reading it. Please let me know your thoughts and follow me on all the things. I have a book talk too where I talk about books as well. I'm really excited to make more long form content and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.